The evolutionary purpose of the brain, a biological mechanism for survival. The human brain, a complex organ weighing approximately 1.4 kilograms, is the most intricate structure known in the universe. Yet, despite its vast capabilities, language, creativity, social interaction, and abstract thought, its evolutionary purpose is far simpler: to ensure survival. This central thesis, grounded in evolutionary biology and neuroscience, asserts that the brain evolved as a tool for adaptive behavior, enabling organisms to detect, interpret, and respond to changes in the environment in ways that maximize their chances of staying alive and reproducing. The brain's vast cognitive powers are secondary adaptations. The fundamental function is biological survival. Understanding this function requires dissecting the evolution, structure, and operational principles of the brain across different species, including Homo sapiens. From an evolutionary standpoint, life forms that were better at responding to their environments were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. This simple principle, natural selection, underpins the development of all biological traits, including the nervous system and, eventually, the brain. The earliest multicellular organisms had no brains. Rather, they relied on chemical gradients and simple reflexes to interact with their surroundings. Over hundreds of millions of years, certain clusters of nerve cells, or ganglia, began coordinating increasingly complex patterns of behavior. The aggregation of these neural networks in the anterior, front, region of organisms led to the formation of what we now recognize as a centralized brain. Thus, the brain did not emerge to facilitate art, philosophy, or even social bonding. It emerged to make survival-based decisions faster and more efficiently than decentralized systems. The primary functions of the brain can be divided into several key domains related to survival: sensory integration, motor coordination, homeostatic regulation, threat detection, and adaptive learning. Each of these functions is present across a wide spectrum of animal life and represents incremental steps in neural evolution. Sensory integration allows organisms to gather data about their environment: light, sound, chemical signals, temperature, and pressure, and transform that data into neural impulses. These inputs are processed in brain regions specialized for their respective modalities. For example, in humans, the occipital lobe processes visual information, while the temporal lobe handles auditory data. However, similar functions exist in less complex animals. The octopus, despite having a radically different brain structure from vertebrates, exhibits a comparable ability to interpret its surroundings and respond effectively. Motor coordination is the second essential function of the brain, as survival depends not just on sensing the environment, but on responding to it. Neurons in the motor cortex of mammals, for example, send signals to muscles to produce movement. This is not limited to locomotion, but includes the manipulation of tools, grasping prey, or fleeing from predators. Even the most basic organisms, like the nematode Cenorhabditis elegans, with only 302 neurons, have a simple neural network that governs movement in response to environmental stimuli. This illustrates the brain's most primal role, converting sensory information into motor actions that increase the organism's chances of survival. Homeostatic regulation is another vital function of the brain, ensuring that internal conditions remain stable despite external fluctuations. This includes regulation of body temperature, blood pressure, glucose levels, and hydration. In vertebrates, the hypothalamus plays a central role in this function. When blood sugar drops, the brain signals hunger. When the body overheats, it initiates sweating. These feedback loops are not arbitrary. They are tightly controlled mechanisms that maintain the delicate internal balance required for cells to function. Without homeostasis, even the most adaptable behaviors would fail to sustain life. Perhaps the most critical evolutionary advancement enabled by the brain is threat detection. This involves rapidly identifying dangers in the environment and initiating an appropriate response, whether fight, flight, freeze, or appease. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure in the brain, is especially important in this context. It is involved in the rapid assessment of threats and the initiation of fear responses. Evolutionarily, this structure is ancient. Even reptiles and birds exhibit amygdala-driven behavior. A gazelle that can detect a lion in the periphery and flee instantly is more likely to survive and reproduce. The speed and accuracy of these threat assessments governed by specialized neural circuits, underscore how deeply the brain is oriented toward preserving life. Adaptive learning and memory represent the final essential function of the brain in survival. While instinctive behaviors are hardwired, learning allows an organism to modify behavior based on experience. This plasticity enables more nuanced and effective interactions with complex environments. The hippocampus is crucial for the formation of long-term memories, particularly spatial and declarative memory. In rodents, the hippocampus maps out the physical environment, helping the animal navigate and remember the locations of food or danger. In humans, this system is vastly more complex but retains the same function, encoding experiences in a way that improves future decisions related to survival. It is critical to distinguish survival-driven intelligence from higher cognitive functions, such as morality, aesthetics, or even empathy. These are often considered the pinnacle of human brain function, but from a strictly evolutionary perspective, they are byproducts or extensions of survival mechanisms. For instance, the ability to cooperate or feel empathy can enhance group cohesion, which in turn improves survival odds in hostile environments. However, these capacities are not ends in themselves. They are advantageous because they serve the deeper primary purpose, staying alive long enough to reproduce and ensure the continuation of one's genes. The modularity of the brain further supports its survival-based function. The brain is not a monolithic processor. Rather, it consists of specialized regions evolved to carry out distinct tasks. This modular architecture ensures that various survival functions can operate simultaneously and, in some cases, unconsciously. For example, the brainstem, responsible for regulating vital functions like heartbeat and breathing, operates independently of conscious awareness. This autonomy is a feature, not a flaw. It allows higher-order brain functions to focus on more variable tasks, such as social interaction or tool use, without compromising the basics of life support. Furthermore, the concept of the triune brain, although outdated in its original form, offers a simplified model that highlights the layered evolution of brain structures. In this model, the reptilian brain, brainstem, and basal ganglia governs instinctive behaviors necessary for survival. The limbic system, shared with mammals, introduces emotions and memory processing, helping organisms evaluate situations more flexibly. The neocortex, particularly developed in primates, enables complex problem-solving, language, and planning. While the terminology may be imprecise, the underlying idea remains useful. Newer brain regions evolved to build upon the survival functions of older ones, not to replace them. Neurochemistry also supports the survival-centric model of brain function. Neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine are not primarily about pleasure, mood, or happiness. They are biochemical tools for reinforcing behaviors that improve survival chances. Dopamine, for instance, is heavily involved in reward prediction error. When an action yields a better result than expected, dopamine levels spike, reinforcing that behavior. This is not about pleasure per se. It is about learning which behaviors are beneficial for survival and which are not. Serotonin's role in social dominance, resource allocation, and impulse control further illustrates how chemical signaling in the brain is tailored to optimize adaptive behavior, not necessarily emotional well-being. From a developmental perspective, the brain's growth follows the logic of survival prioritization. In utero and early postnatal development focus first on the brainstem and cerebellum, regions essential for basic survival. Only later do higher cortical regions mature. This developmental trajectory mirrors the evolutionary history of the brain and reinforces the hierarchy of survival functions. Early reflexes like the rooting or grasping reflex in infants are mediated by primitive brain circuits that enable immediate post-birth survival. As children grow, more complex circuits come online, allowing for nuanced decision-making, problem-solving, and social learning, all of which serve to improve survival prospects in a complex world. Evolutionary constraints also shape the brain's design. The metabolic cost of running a brain is immense. It consumes about 20% of the body's energy, despite accounting for only 2% of body mass. Such a cost would not be evolutionarily sustainable unless the brain significantly enhanced survival. In species with fewer cognitive demands, such as reptiles, the brain is proportionally smaller and less energetically costly. In primates, and especially humans, the return on investment is greater because the environment is more complex, requiring more sophisticated behaviors for effective survival. The energy expenditure is thus justified only by the increased capacity for adaptive behavior. Comparative neuroanatomy further confirms the survival-centric model of brain evolution. Across species, brains vary not randomly, but in accordance with ecological niches and survival challenges. Bats, for instance, have a highly developed auditory cortex to support echolocation. Birds that store food have an enlarged hippocampus to manage spatial memory. Predators have forward-facing eyes and brain regions specialized for depth perception, aiding in hunting. Each of these traits reflects adaptations not for pleasure or aesthetics, but for improving survival efficiency in a given environment. These examples underscore that brains evolved to solve specific survival problems with form tightly following function. Moreover, computational models of cognition and artificial intelligence provide additional support for the survival-based model of brain function. In robotics and machine learning, artificial agents are often programmed to maximize reward signals or minimize threat. Parallels to biological survival mechanisms. Reinforcement learning, a foundational concept in AI, is directly modeled on how dopamine systems function in the brain. These parallels are not coincidental, but arise because the logic of adaptive behavior, whether in silicon or carbon, is rooted in the same fundamental principles. Identify patterns, predict outcomes, and make decisions that increase the odds of persistence over time. Pathological conditions also shed light on the brain's survival orientation. Disorders such as anxiety, PTSD, and phobias are often viewed as maladaptive, but can be understood as exaggerated survival responses. These conditions reflect a hyperactivation of threat detection circuits, particularly in the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. Similarly, addictive behaviors hijack the brain's reward systems, reinforcing behaviors that, under normal conditions, would be associated with resource acquisition or reproduction. Even in dysfunction, the underlying architecture remains tuned to survival logic. In conclusion, the brain is not an organ designed for happiness, material success, or existential fulfillment. Those are human constructs that emerge from a more fundamental imperative: to stay alive. Every neuron, synapse, and neurotransmitter exist to support this goal. From the simplest reflexes to the most elaborate cognitive strategies, the brain operates as a biological computer continuously assessing risk, opportunity, and optimal behavior in an ever-changing environment. Its ultimate function is survival, not as a concept or an ideal, but as a measurable, testable outcome shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Understanding the brain through this lens offers clarity about its design, function, and limitations, stripping away layers of cultural and philosophical abstraction to reveal the raw, elegant machinery of life. That's it for now. Please let us know in the comments what you learned from this video. Thanks for your time. See you later.